Hey YouTube, I'm here in Krabi, Thailand, and I wanted to come to you today with a video to discuss the personality profile of expats. I'm going to be using the 5-factor model here, Ocean. Thank you to Dr. Todd Grande. Before I get into it, I want to let you know I'm not a psychologist. I did minor in psychology in college, but I'm by no means an expert. This isn't a diagnosis. This is just a video with some observations about what I've noticed about the personality traits of different expats that I've interacted with over the years, and also personality traits of myself. For the 5-factor model, we have O, openness to new experience. We have C for conscientiousness. We have E for extroversion. We have A for agreeableness, and we wrap up with N, neuroticism. So for O, this is the one that I'm most confident about. I think that all expats tend to be higher on the openness to new experience just by the nature of living overseas. You have to be a person who's open to trying new things. There's nobody who's going to buy a plane ticket and go halfway around the world who's rigid or closed off or afraid to try new things. So all of us are on the side of open to new experience. From my observation, my own experience, I've always been the type of person to try a lot of different things. I am diagnosed ADD, ADHD. That really comes out in my desire to travel, to have novel experiences, to try new things, to be a risk taker. Travel and living overseas is no different from all of that. Now, are some people more open than others? Sure. Some people are more open to riding a motorbike, trying different kinds of local cuisine. I think all of us are going to be greater than the average person when it comes to openness to new experience. I found a lot of expats, particularly those that I interact with and meet online, to be really bright people that have figured out an alternative lifestyle that works really well for them and their happiness. Number 2 is conscientiousness, and this is something that I think is the most variable, because you do see some expats that did not prepare very well for the future, and then you see other expats that have prepared for expat life for decades. They knew a long time ago, I want to live overseas or I want financial freedom, one of the two, and they saved and invested. They lived a minimalist lifestyle, lived below their means, the lifestyle that their salary would allow for them to live. They want to take the results of their hard work, their money, their IOUs, and go travel or live in some beautiful exotic destination. So with conscientiousness, I'd say it's variable. I like to think that it's higher than average, because for a person to produce the excess wealth, assuming they're retiring early, is going to take hard work. It's going to take discipline, intellect, rigor, grit. Living below your means is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. On the other hand, you do have some people that didn't really prepare, and now with the rising cost of living in the Western countries, then they're finding, hey, I'm priced out of here. If I stay here on what I have, I'm going to live a very low quality of life. And then there's also that sweet spot where people did prepare, they did save and invest, but their income is in that mid-range where living back home would not provide a high quality of life. But if they take that money overseas, it goes very far. We're talking like the 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4K range, where in San Francisco, near where I used to live, your small studio is going to be $2,000 a month. I've met some expats that are really bright. They worked really hard in their field. You see somebody like Chris from Retired Working for You, and he had a long duration in the film industry, and you really see it in the quality of his vlogs. Moving forward, if these destinations become more expensive, then it will result in a more conscientious crowd. Especially with the FIRE movement, a majority of proponents or subscribers or followers of the FIRE movement tend to be more conscientious than average. The idea, if pulled off successfully, is living far below your means. To do that, you're giving up a lot. You're making some sacrifices in quality of life. I've rented some not so great apartments. I've worked some jobs that were stressful, but I wanted the money because I knew it would move me further along to my goal. You see this a lot with military veterans. The military is known to increase conscientiousness. They have done studies on it. If I can find a study, I'll throw a link in the description. So that's number 2. How do expats rank in conscientiousness? It's so variable, it's hard for me to say. I like to think it's higher than average. Others would say it's lower than average. Moving on to point number 3, extroversion versus introversion. When it comes to extroversion versus introversion, I think expats tend to be lower than average extroversion. I think they tend toward introverted. I know a lot of extroverted people back in my hometown, and I think that it would just be hard for them to be away from their friends and family for an extended period of time. They would rather live in proximity to the people that they are very close to, because those people value that proximity a lot. Whereas me as an introvert, I enjoy my friends, but I have an easier time recharging and feeling energetic when I'm spending more time by myself. Doesn't mean I don't like my friends, doesn't mean I don't enjoy them or want to spend time around them. But as far as recharging, as far as enjoying life, I practice a lot of healthy self-love such that I'm happy on my own. I don't need much externally besides food and shelter to be happy. I prefer to just spend time outdoors, enjoying nature, being in cities, trying out cool restaurants, and having a lot of control and flexibility over my own schedule such that I really do have a lot of freedom that is harder and harder to find in the Western world due to the increased cost of living and the need to hustle to stay on top of it, because how do you get money? Well, you get money from other people. For introverts who don't enjoy being around others as much, it takes more effort to try to figure out ways to get that money from other people that don't involve tons and tons of socializing. And I think the other part of that is for those of us who work in sales that are introverts, we're so tired from our day job, we don't have a lot of energy for socializing. After a hard day in sales, I don't really want to talk a lot. I want to just rest, because chances are I've been talking for hours and hours straight. I've been listening to people for hours and hours straight, and I just want to chill out. It's one of those things where an introvert is going to have an easier time being far away from home, not knowing the language, not knowing how to do things. You have to be willing and able to handle a lot of things on your own. I do a lot of research online because I don't want to be having to go up to random people and asking for help. This, in my opinion, opens you up to touts or scammers at times. Not to say everybody that you don't know you can't trust, but certainly there's some risk there. Point number 4, agreeable versus disagreeable. I think expats tend to be more disagreeable. I think it goes in line with the conscientiousness, needing to work hard to make the money needed to live elsewhere. Disagreeable people tend to earn more money than agreeable people. This shows, right, in the people that have the excess money to come enjoy outside of their home country. It does tend to attract people who are more disagreeable, and we see this in some of the extreme scenarios, the far end of disagreeableness, where we see expats getting in trouble, getting in legal issues, having physical confrontations with other expats, having physical confrontations with locals. It's all around unfortunate. That's disagreeableness taken to the extreme. I don't think that all of us are that extreme. I think that a lot of us lean disagreeable, but we can function fine outside of our home countries. And if you're in a place like Australia or New Zealand that has been populated by a lot of immigrants, specifically Western immigrants in the past, your ancestors were probably high in openness to experience in the sense that they were willing to chance it. Well, they had to be. They had to be to push through the difficulties of being in a strange land where you don't know the rules, the customs, the way of doing things. You may not be familiar with the etiquette. You may have to negotiate deals, whether you're buying a house or you're trying to buy a piece of land or you're buying equities or you're paying for services. You can't just let people walk all over you. There are those expats on the other end that just get chewed up and spit out by bad actors in their destination. You'll see them get ripped off by one significant other, and then two, and then a third one, and it just keeps going on and on until some of them end up totally broke and on the street, which is really unfortunate, but it does happen. I think some of that's just a lack of boundaries. I think some agreeable people tend to struggle more with boundaries and saying no, and it's to their own detriment. You also see the disagreeable nature in some expat forums. A lot of expat forums are toxic places with frustrated people, and a lot of those people will go on there and just pick arguments over the smallest of things, correcting each other's grammar, correcting very minute differences. You said this was $2, it was actually $2.25. That's a made-up one, but you get my point. Some people are just dissatisfied in their home country. They go overseas, they're still dissatisfied and unhappy there, but they've sunk so much money and time into it that they can't really go back on what they said. So there's an extractive element there where they want to engage not to make friendly conversation, but to get something out of you. It just really gets on my nerves about Western society, where it used to be just boring, but now it's stressful and boring because you're having to fend people off all the time. Point number 5 is the trait neuroticism, the N in ocean, and I think expats tend to be neurotic. They tend toward neuroticism. If things were working out for you back home, you'd have no interest to go live in another country. I think a lot of us tend to have some kind of issue. We feel that our mental health is better overseas. I've found that to be the case. My mental health is a lot better overall outside the United States. Some of my PTSD comes from life in the United States. The poor people in the United States tend to be stressed out because their life's not very good, and the wealthy people tend to be stressed out because they're working really hard to maintain and grow their wealth. We see the expat bars full of guys guys all the time. It's unfortunate. A lot of those guys are struggling with neuroticism. Some of them are dealing with their neurotic feelings through abusing substances. They're using substances to deal with their anxiety or their depression. In some cases, the substance will improve one set of symptoms and make another set of symptoms worse. Like certain people get anxiety relief from imbibing the drink, but then their depression gets worse. I think relief from our neuroticism drives a lot of us overseas. I've had wonderful experiences in a variety of countries. It seems that in the US, because we are in such heavy pursuit of money, that we have to set aside our feelings and our desires and our preferences as a sacrifice to get that money. But once we have that money, it's like, okay, why am I putting up with this here? I don't need a bigger house. I don't need a fancier car. I don't need the penthouse in Miami. I just want to enjoy my time. And so we spent so much of our time not enjoying our time that we want to get to a point where we can actually do what we want to do instead of having to do what we're told to do by our boss or what we're encouraged to do by our families. We're tired of that societal pressure. And I meet a lot of interesting kind of bohemian characters around the world, people who just felt like their home country was too orderly. They had to constantly color inside the lines, and it's stressful for them to do so. They prefer living overseas. They prefer these beautiful views. They prefer lovely nightlife. They prefer the food overseas. I mean, some of us in America, we're struggling with neuroticism because the food is terrible for our health. We see this with Americans, that the majority struggle with their weight. I know I've struggled with my weight. There's a lot of additives and hormones that they're allowed to use in the food that can cause us to be unhealthy. And so for neuroticism, a lot of us, we're struggling with it back home. We leave to get a better handle on it. I hope these 5 tips have been helpful for you. Let us know what you think down in the comments. What is your expat personality profile as far as the ocean model is concerned? Please subscribe to the channel down below if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.